When Vladimir Putin announced his invasion of Ukraine, he justified it by offering a long revisionist history about Russia's relationship with Ukraine. Today, when Putin kicked off his brief press conference with Donald Trump, brief by 12 minutes, he began with another history lesson, this time about Russia's relationship with the United States.
We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship.
So why did the Russian leader spend so much of this press conference about Ukraine talking about the history between Russia and the United States? He loves a history lesson. He had maps, too, in the meeting, apparently. But joining me now is Julia Yaffe, Washington correspondent for Puck News, who has covered this for a long time, wrote a really fascinating piece recently for Puck, which we'll also talk about. But let me start by just asking you, you have covered Putin for a long time. What did you make of the meeting? What did you make of the historical digression, the inclusion of maps today in the meeting? What did you make of all of it? I think I'm having trouble. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think I'm old and I mute myself on Zooms. Okay.
We've all been there.
Well, I think it was par for the course for Putin. He loves a good history lesson. As you know, with Obama, he would start with these history lessons that you all called the airing of grievances. With Tucker Carlson, he gave him a long history lesson that went back to the 10th, 11th century. And today we got a history lesson about peace. I think is interesting because for the last 10 years, Putin and Russian propaganda have avoided mentioning Lend-Lease like the plague, because Lend-Lease actually helped the Soviet Union quite a bit to not collapse in the face of the Nazi invasion in 1941-42. And acknowledging that, saying that, World War II is sacrosanct. It's part of the ruling cult of Vladimir Putin. And saying that America helped us win that was a no-go zone for the last 10 years. The narrative was very much, we won World War II on our own. We did all the killing and dying. The Americans are cowards. They didn't get in until 1944 to kind of put the cherry on the sundae, but we did all the hard work. So it was interesting that he started with that. And, before he came over to the U.S. and hopped the international date line, he went and laid a wreath at the memorial for fighter pilots who flew those missions. I think it was just, theatrics to butter up Trump. But what I made of it was Vladimir Putin showed up for the win, to pocket the win. He didn't need a deal, but he knew damn well that Donald Trump was incredibly thirsty for one, because he's, just collecting countries. Today he was talking about Cambodia and Rwanda and the Congo, Azerbaijan and Armenia. He's just seeing this like charms on a bracelet. And I think Putin knows that it was very clear in watching the Russian propaganda in the lead up to this summit and talking to sources in Moscow. Everybody was saying that, we know Donald Trump really wants a deal. We don't really need one. If anything, a ceasefire or a peace deal right now would hold us back and would be detrimental for Russia. We're winning.
Thirsty for a deal. We're going to put that on a T-shirt somewhere and give you credit for it, because that seems to be Trump's motto. I think, to your point, the question I've been asking people is sort of like, what leverage in this moment does Trump really have? Because to your point, you watch more Russian propaganda than I do, but we've been paying attention to it a bit. They've made a lot of military progress. This was a particularly successful military week or so in Russia. I may have read that actually in your piece. In Ukraine for Russia. And it's like, why would they make a deal at this point? What leverage do you think the U.S. really has if they really want to seek something like a ceasefire or an actual end to this war?
Well, they could do the things that Keith Kellogg, who was originally supposed to be Trump's advisor on this, but is now just dealing with the Ukraine part, if at all. What he was saying, if you remember last summer, heading into the election, he was saying that if Vladimir Putin doesn't cooperate and doesn't give Donald Trump the deal, then Donald Trump will arm Ukraine to the hilt, will flood Ukraine with weapons and slam Russia with sanctions so that he knows they're serious. But Trump has avoided doing that.
Joining us now, Timothy Snyder, author of the New York Times bestsellers On Freedom and On Tyranny. Tim, good to see you. Putting aside the fact that this meeting appeared to achieve nothing, Donald Trump had looked like he had changed his tack with Vladimir Putin, starting to talk tough as recently as yesterday, suggesting there will be sanctions if they don't agree to some kind of a deal. And then you watched what we watched in Anchorage. Nothing but fawning and admiration for Vladimir Putin, who seemed to be running the show, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to take a step back from the two men and just remind us what's going on. There's been for 3.5 years an illegal war of aggression. Mr. Putin is an indicted war criminal. His armies have destroyed entire cities. They've kidnapped tens of thousands of Ukrainian children for brainwashing and re-education. They've killed hundreds of thousands of people. The attacks on civilians are ongoing. This is the great crisis of our time. And knowing that, having that as the contrast for these two men going to Alaska, in their suits and smiling and taking car rides together, it's a shocking contrast. And what it reveals, coming to your question, is that what Mr. Trump is thinking about so far, as far as we can tell, is just himself. All you have to do is stand next to him and say nice things about him, and then you get his permission to do whatever you want in the rest of the world.
And to be clear, Vladimir Putin's position has not changed since the first day of the war. There have been no concessions. There's no attempt to do anything except, as you said, praise Trump and suggest that he might be a peacemaker at some point. Nothing's actually happened on the ground. And every time Donald Trump takes a strong position vis-a-vis Russia, Russia then launches a massive attack on Ukraine, which could be underway now and could be underway tomorrow. That's how they respond to Donald Trump putting pressure.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we can tell so far, they have his number completely. So when you say Trump takes a strong position, I mean, what you have in his mind is his occasional rhetorical shifts where he feels pushed to concede that, in fact, Russia has done something in this war. But what Mr. Trump has not done, and this distinguishes him from President Biden, he hasn't made any policy. He hasn't invoked sanctions, secondary sanctions. He hasn't talked about freezing Russian assets. He hasn't talked about increasing aid for Ukraine. On the contrary, he's made huge concessions to Russia. He's tried to take NATO off the table. He doesn't talk about reparations. He doesn't talk about any sort of punishment after the war. He's made these huge concessions. So the Russians believe they have his number. The Russians believe all they have to do is flatter him. The Russians believe they can then make fun of him on television, as they will be doing this evening, and that things will just continue to go their way.
You are not just an historian, but you really understand this region very well. You're a bit of a specialist on it. Vladimir Putin, interestingly enough, mentioned that U.S.-Russian relations are at a low point since the Cold War, as if it has nothing to do with the invasion of Ukraine, and then talks about sort of dealing with the root causes of the issue and suggesting that it was Russia's security concerns that led to the invasion of Ukraine a couple of years ago. Now, this is not that outside of the ordinary. In fact, Hitler used these same excuses in invading neighboring countries all the way back then. Their own security concerns, extending the umbrella of protection to German speakers in other countries. It's a perversion of history and the truth.
Well, for Hitler, it was a security problem that Poland existed. It was a security problem that Czechoslovakia existed. And for Putin, it's a security problem that Ukraine exists. When Putin talks about the root causes, what he has in mind is that Ukraine exists, that Ukraine is sovereign, that its people vote for their own leaders. And if we accept that as a root cause of war, what we are doing is inviting back an age of imperialism where anybody has the right to invade anybody else just because they're bigger and they feel like it. And that, of course, is the entire mood which Mr. Putin was trying to establish with a great deal of success, thanks to Mr. Trump at the summit, that everything that happens in the world is just about great powers who have nuclear weapons, who meet and shake hands and ride together in cars and then do whatever they want. Whereas out in the rest of the world, we have sovereign states and we have nations and we have people who want to live in freedom and, yes, peace, who have to defend themselves when one of these countries says a root cause of war is that you exist.
How do you deal with the fact that we came to this conclusion after World War II, that as a world, we would not accept this? It's not just if you're a NATO member. We accept it as a world that states are sovereign and should be free of invasion from other states. The idea that this conversation occurred in Anchorage without any reference to NATO, without any reference to an actual invasion by one country of another country, and with the United States president standing there and not standing up for the basic rule of order that we've decided that we've had in the world since the end of World War II. How do you think about that? How do you process that?
It's very simple. I mean, I think Mr. Trump sincerely wants to be remembered as a peacemaker. But his refusal to take on board all of the realities about the world, past and present, which have to do with war and peace, makes this impossible. What's happened, on the contrary, is that Mr. Trump has made this war longer and he's made it worse. He was the great hope of Russia, which is a fact he cannot face. He remains, from Russia's point of view, a sustaining and encouraging factor in this war. And that will be the case so long as he continues to do the kinds of things like he just did. Inviting an indicted war criminal inside your military base and your personal limousine is not a signal that you want a war to end.
Trump got played. He got dog walked today. He got dragged up and down the entire length of Alaska, all the way from the peninsula with the archipelago of islands all the way. Might probably got dragged all the way to Moscow and back. Did not go well for him. And again, this is not defending the motives and morals of Vladimir Putin. But he won. And he won. We talked about this. He won because the meeting happened. Trump welcomed an international pariah who in many countries right now, if he landed there, would be arrested. He's a war criminal, right? Much like Bibi, another friend of Trump, that if he lands in many countries, he would also be arrested, right? And so Trump gave him very high legitimacy. Look, a lot of people criticize the Helsinki meeting. And yes, by that point, he had already done what he did in Crimea. But Russia was not the pariah in 2018 that it is now. Maybe it should have been. That's a debate people want to have. But like they were hosting the Olympics in Sochi and all of that. Trump, though, legitimized him here. So right off the bat, it's a win for Putin. But Putin also won because he knows that he holds the high ground here. Because he knows that Trump wants a deal for his ego. He wants a deal for his ego. And so Trump, knowing that his ego is more important than the lives of either Americans or Ukrainians, is willing to just play along. And people who understand that used it against Trump. Vladimir Putin knows how to play these games. Donald, as we covered earlier, cannot walk straight or think straight.